Nurses play a vital role in our society to spread their knowledge and mobilize people to make positive health changes. Today's nurses are particularly positioned in a place of power that allows them to connect the nursing world with the world around us. They're able to explain what nurses know and do in a way to connect issues of public concern. So it is important for nurses to have a presence in the news media. The public still largely relies on the news media or forms of journalism for information. And according to Gordon and Burish, 50% of people read newspapers or online news sites at least once a week. The presence of nurses in news media has been continually lacking for some time now. Diversity is a key to good journalism, and healthcare coverage in the news underrepresents nurses as a whole. The Woodhull study, published in 1998, looked at what percentage of nurses were used as sources of information, cited for quotes, and accredited in photos in journalism. They found that nurses were identified as sources of information in only 4% of national and regional newspapers and print organizations, and in only 1% of weeklies and smaller publications. At the time, nurses were never cited in articles regarding healthcare policy and rarely accredited in photos accompanying the articles. How does this make sense? At a time when nurses make up the nation's largest group of healthcare professionals, 3.5 million to be exact, that we are still so neglected in the news media. The study was revisited in September 2017 to see if there has been any change in nursing presence. Using the same methodology as in 1998, it was found that health-related articles only cited nurses as sources of information and quotations in only 2% of articles, and only 4% of images from news articles identified people as nurses. With this clearly still being a problem, it is important we address the issue and make the voice of nurses be heard. A recent news story you may recall is the shooting that involved U.S. House of Representatives Gabrielle Giffords. Giffords attained a serious head injury, and news stories surrounded her injury and whether or not she would recover. The medical director of the University Medical Center in Tucson's Trauma and Critical Care Unit, Dr. Peter Rhee, became the spokesperson for the case. This highly televised and reported news story rarely mentioned the hard work that was put forth from critical care nurses and other hospital personnel. A few passing phrases like doctors and nurses were all that could be attributed to the nursing profession during this time, while prominent news magazines like The Times went on publishing detailed accounts of the medical center's top physicians involved in the case. The continued reporting of physician-centered medical care goes on to create the impression that physicians would have all the power and all the knowledge when it comes to patients' well-being, and nurses are here to just simply carry out the orders.
So what are some interventions that can be used to change this problem? First, nurses need to be open to being interviewed and visible. I can see that with my own staff, a couple of whom are unwilling to even have their picture taken to celebrate Nurses Week or School Nurse Day. I think part of this goes back to a couple of points made in Burish and Gordon's From Silence to Voice. We, as a nursing community, fear being seen as prideful about our work and continue to remain silent about our accomplishments. We also need to be more proactive in accessing and responding to journalists or seeking opportunities to speak to them. We need to remember that by avoiding being interviewed, nurses are not only missing valuable opportunities to advocate for nursing and the profession of nursing, but also for patient issues. Another thing we can do is find a global health issue and champion it in the news as a nurse. For example, it could be about infectious diseases and immunization rates, maternal child health related issues, or human trafficking. Nurses are positioned with the ability to develop a creative and effective network to respond to multifaceted problems. And professional nurses can contribute as global leaders of change by becoming active in communities. Another intervention we can utilize is using the nursing out loud system. It's basically an explain of why what we do, articulate our assessments, and verbalize our thoughts when with patients. Why do we get patients out of the bed and walking after surgery? Why are we listening to the lungs, and what are we listening for and why? It's articulating what we do, why we do, and the science behind it. The other thing we need to be considerate of in changing our perception in the news media is our professional and personal image. Do we look professional or do we look cutesy? Do we look like we rolled out of bed when we're putting scrubs on? And do we model a healthy lifestyle? And finally, I think a big intervention that we are missing is we need to speak about ourselves as science professionals that make life and death decisions by using critical assessment skills.
So as nurses, we take on many roles. We not only care for our patients in a very personal way, but we also have an understanding of their complex health needs. So the public often doesn't fully understand that. I think that a lot of people understand that nurses are compassionate, caring individuals, but I'm not sure that the public generally understands everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. I know even in my personal life, I am dating a cross-country coach, and I try to explain to him what we do every day, and it seems like people have to have almost a first-person experience, whether it be in the hospital or their family member is sick, in order to really understand and appreciate the role that a nurse plays. And I feel like the media is partially responsible for that. As Kristen and Laura have already talked about, we are underrepresented, and we need to feel supported by the public as well as healthcare administrators. Even in my role now as a nurse educator for a medical device company, I find it very challenging to go on site to complete training sessions with nurses where they aren't supported by administration and need to attend training while they're on shift, which causes lots of distractions, and I think could potentially lead to poor outcomes for patients. So I think that if we take a good look at the trends and where we can go forward from here, that nursing perceptions of nurses can significantly improve, and in turn, patient outcomes will improve. So after taking what we've learned from Laura's research and from Kristen's implications, we want to make sure that going forward we get things right. So a perfect example of when I think that this was done wrong was in the advertising for the Massachusetts 2018 election, and the question one about nurse-patient ratios. I was shocked after the election at how much the public voted no against safe patient limits. I think it was like 70% no to 30% yes. And I remember at the time that it was just about a year ago, and there was so much advertising talking about the financial burden that would happen when nurses are mandated to a certain number of patients. And I almost think that there were a lot of scare tactics used to make people think that the ER wait times would go up and that patient satisfaction would go down. So I just want to make sure that in the media, nurses are fully understood. I think that it's easy to portray nurses as these compassionate, caring individuals, but we not only have to think of the nursing profession as caring, but also highly educated, scientific, analytical individuals who make a difference in the healthcare team. And I think if we do that, it will not only improve the confidence that nurses have in their own practice, but it will improve patient outcomes as well.